I'm going to walk through the Blackmagic design Pyxis 6K cinema camera the way I would if I were sitting at a desk with a friend who's just starting to think about stepping up from a DSLR or a smartphone. The big question most of us face is whether the gear we spend a few $1,000s on will actually make our projects look better without turning the whole shoot into a tech support nightmare. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the past couple of weeks testing the Pyxis on a short documentary, a music video set, and a low-light indie scene, and I want to break down what that experience really means for you, the buyer who's weighing risk against reward. First off, the Pyxis is built around a 36 by 24 mm full-frame sensor that delivers a genuine 6K image at 60484032. That's a lot of pixels, and in practice it translates to a noticeable ability to pull detail out of shadows and keep highlights from blowing out, especially when you're shooting outdoors on a bright day. On the documentary shoot, I took it to a park at midday, and the dynamic range felt generous enough that I could keep the sky and the foliage in the same frame without resorting to ND filters. For a music video that required a shallow depth-of-field look, the sensor size gave me that creamy bokeh you'd normally only see with a more expensive cinema rig. If you're already comfortable framing and lighting, the extra resolution is a clear win. If you're still learning those basics, you might end up with more data to manage than you need. Autofocus is one of those deal breakers for many creators, and the Pyxis uses Blackmagic's contrast detect system rather than a fast phase detect array. In my hands, the focus was reliable when I was tracking a walking subject at about 10 feet, but it hesitated on sudden changes in distance. I found that manual focus with the built-in focus assist peaking was more consistent for critical shots. That doesn't mean the camera is unusable for run-and-gun work, but if you need a camera that can lock onto a moving performer in a live event without a focus puller, you'll have to budget extra time for rehearsals or consider a model with a more aggressive AF engine. Low-light performance is another practical concern. The full-frame sensor, combined with a respectable ISO range, gave usable footage down to ISO 3200 without the noise getting too distracting. In the indie scene I shot at a dimly lit bar, I cranked it to ISO 6400 and the grain stayed subtle, though you could see it if you blew up the image on a big screen. The key takeaway is that the Pyxis can handle most indoor situations you'll encounter, but it won't replace a dedicated low-light prime lens or a camera with a larger sensor and native ISO prowess. If you routinely shoot in near darkness, you might still need supplemental lighting. Stabilization on the Pyxis is purely mechanical. You'll need a gimbal or a sturdy rig to get smooth motion. The camera's body is relatively light for a 6K unit, which makes it a good match for handheld rigs, but I felt a noticeable wobble when I tried to walk with it for a long take. On the other hand, because the camera records both Blackmagic RAW and an H.264 proxy stream, you can shoot RAW for maximum flexibility and simultaneously have a lightweight proxy for quick onset review or rough cuts. That dual recording workflow saved me editing time, especially when I needed to pull a clip in a pinch without waiting for a full RAW decode. Lens ecosystem is a practical factor for anyone buying a cinema camera. The Pyxis uses an mount, which means you have access to a growing selection of lenses from Leica, Sigma, and a few boutique makers. In my testing, I paired it with a Sigma Art 2470mm, a Leica Summilux 35mm, and a modestly priced Zeiss 50mm. The mount's short flange distance also lets you adapt many vintage lenses with simple adapters, opening creative options without huge expense. The downside is that you won't find as many native cinema lenses as you would on a PL or EF mount. So if your workflow already hinges on a specific lens line, you may need to factor in adapter costs and potential focus shift issues. The on-camera menu system is a point where many users stumble. Blackmagic's UI is clean, but it's geared toward people who have already spent time in DaVinci Resolve. The touchscreen is a 4-inch HDR panel capable of 1500 nits, which is bright enough to read outdoors, and the menu hierarchy feels logical once you know where to look. However, the first 30 minutes of use involve hunting for the right recording format, setting up the proxy stream, and adjusting the ISO curves. If you're a beginner who prefers a one-button start shooting experience, you'll need to budget a learning curve. Battery confidence is often overlooked until you're on set and the gauge flickers red. The Pyxis uses a standard Sony NPF 970 battery, which is readily available and offers roughly 90 minutes of continuous shooting at 6K 30 FPS. In my longer,